These days, it seems like everyone knows about the law of attraction. It's not just woo-woo spiritual types practicing it. It's like literally everyone. We see it in tabloids. We see it in business books. We see it in self-help. The law of attraction has its roots in ancient esoteric practice, and today the sacred magic is being used to manifest millions and yachts full of big booty bitches. Shockingly, most of the people who are interested in these things are more interested in the application than they are in why or how these things work. So if that is for you, this video probably isn't. But if you are a seeker probing more deeply into the great mystery, this video is for you. We rise up from the dust and clean my throat. Now, normally, when the New Age hippies talk about the law of attraction, they talk about it in terms of energetics, man, and frequency, which is great, and I love it, but I'm also only half hippie, okay? The other half is cyborg.
I am not a lizard.
And so I always need more information. And today, I would like to share a perspective on manifesting that I don't think is often talked about, and to do this, we're gonna take a look through the lens of quantum frickin' physics, my dude. Now, one thing we've talked about often on this channel is how we tend to take our concept of reality for granted. And so in our day-to-day lives, it really does seem like time is linear, right? We're putting one foot in front of the other, marching to the clock from point A to point B, from cradle to grave. It seems like matter is solid, like we are solid. It also seems like we are entities separate from our environments. And it seems like the world operates on cause and effect, right? Where I touch something over here and it moves something over there. That's how it all seems on the macro level, but when we get down to the quantum level, the really small level, physics start to break down. The world down there doesn't play by the same freaking rules, which is why we kind of need two sets of rules for the world. We need rules for this big world where we are, what do you even call it? The macro world, the not quantum world, and the quantum world. This is really well illustrated by the double-slit experiment, and we're probably going to be talking about this study, this experiment, this type of experiment quite a bit on the channel in the future, because there have been really interesting developments around it in recent years, but today we're just going to explore what the heck it is and how it applies to manifesting. So the double-slit experiment is over a century old. It has been repeated again and again and again, always with the same results, which are completely mind-boggling. They have no idea why this works the way that it does, and they just have a Nobel Prize like waiting in the wings for someone to please come figure this out, because really, like, they don't know what the hell is going on. And it's one of those things, those little bits of quantum weirdness is what they call it, where things stop making sense, or like they don't operate according to laws that we understand. And I'm convinced that all of those little pieces of quantum weirdness are where spirituality and science are going to bridge. I'm convinced that's the portal, my dudes. I digress. In this experiment, a quantum particle is fired through a barrier that has two slits in it. And that particle hits a second panel, or second barrier. It's usually like a screen and another screen. So it hits that second screen and it creates a pattern. Now, if you were to do this experiment with light, you shine light through, and the pattern that you're going to see on that second panel is going to be like a bunch of slats, and that is called an interference pattern, and that happens because light diffracts. If you were to do that same experiment with sand, right, really big particles, you would pour sand through and you would just get two lines of sand, right, two little piles of sand. Now, what's weird about doing this experiment with quantum particles is that sometimes they act like particles and sometimes they act like waves, and it's weird. If you send quantum particles through a single slit, they are going to end their journey I have like a mouthful of cotton, Jesus. Try again, okay. If you send quantum particles through a single slit, they are going to end their journey the way that they started it, as a particle, right? I'm a particle here, I'm a particle there. But things start to get strange when you open up that second slit. When you open up that second slit and you fire an atom through, the pattern on that screen is going to be that of an interference pattern. In other words, it's going to make the pattern that light or something with wave-like behavior would make. It's like this little particle goes through both slits at the same time, which only a wave of energy can do. Only something with wave-like behavior can do. So somehow this little cheeky bugger is both a particle and the wave. But the real question is, how does the particle know that there's two slits there? How does it know that it can go through two of these things and go through both of them, right? Because as far as we know, quantum particles can't know anything. So the only other source of awareness in that room is the person observing the experiment.
Holy f***, that's sorcery.
And here's where things get even weirder. Say you put a detector above that upper slit and you fire atoms through. That detector is going to beep every time it senses a something moving through, right? And so 50% of the time it's going to beep because it's going through the top, 50% of the time it's going to beep presumably because it's going through the bottom. But simply having the detector there changes the pattern on the second screen. It looks like particle behavior where you just have the two slats. It's like now the atom is on its best behavior, that it knows we're watching it and it's doing exactly what we would expect it to do because we're watching it. Look, I don't know if that's mischievous or creepy or really cool. I don't know. But if you're like me, you're going to be asking, what in tarnation is going on? Like sometimes they act like particles, sometimes they act like waves. They seem to know whether there's one or two slits there, and they know when we're watching them.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
There are a few ways to interpret this, and one of the most popular is the Copenhagen interpretation. I don't know how to say it. It's a place in Denmark, but this interpretation was proposed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg in 1927, and I am going to borrow this summary from The Divine Matrix by Dean Radin because he summarizes it perfectly when he writes, according to Bohr and Heisenberg, the universe exists in an infinite number of overlapping possibilities. They're all there in a kind of quantum soup with no precise location or state of being until something happens to lock one of the possibilities into place. That something is a person's awareness, the simple acts of observation. As the experiment proves, when we look at something such as a quantum particle moving through a slit in a barrier, the very act of observation is what appears to turn one of the quantum possibilities into reality. At that moment, all we see is the version we focused on. Wild stuff. And there's a similar but different interpretation called the many worlds interpretation by Hugh Everett. I think it was proposed in like 1955 or something, but his is similar in that it's like, yes, there are all of these infinite possibilities out there, but also they all exist simultaneously and they're all playing out individually in their own corner of the universe where they cannot be perceived by any of the other realities. In other words, alternate realities, bro. And that brings us back to the law of attraction. A lot of times in Loa communities, you'll hear people talk about timeline jumping, right? Like there's infinite timelines and you can jump to an optimal one, and this is how you do that. And that idea is based in the many worlds interpretation, this idea that there are alternate realities. Both of these interpretations can give us some insight into why something like the law of attraction might work. So quantum physics gives us reason to believe that any mix of the following is possible. Human awareness affects the fabric of reality. Infinite alternate universes exist. And the version of reality that we experience depends on what we focus on. The way I have come to understand it is that the world is underpinned by a field of consciousness. And we've talked about that quite a bit on this channel. You can learn more in that video there if you're interested. But the world is underpinned by a field of consciousness, and it holds all possibilities. It cradles every possibility we can imagine, and probably every possibility we can't imagine. And that field acts like an incubator. And what we actually experience, what we pluck from the ether of those infinite possibilities, depends on our focus. And that's where we get into the application of these things, right? When we talk about frequency and vibration and like attracts like and the role of emotion. But that is idea sex for another time. That's all I have for you today. I would love to know in the comments if you believe in the law of attraction, if you practice it. And in any case, thank you so much for joining me today. Hail to the power in the sights. And until next time, I hope you stay very, very blessed, my friends.